In the previous episode, we followed Jack Miller, a man living in seclusion deep within the forests of northern Georgia, as he came face to face with a creature unlike anything ever recorded in scientific literature. From deep claw marks carved into tree trunks to a fateful night where he was attacked by a being with a human face. Jack survived a brutal blow, one that tore part of his ear clean off and left him soaked in blood. But when he finally climbed onto the roof of his cabin and looked back, it was gone, as if it had never existed, except for the silence. That strange, suffocating silence, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. Welcome back to the Inkpath. I'm Leon Graves, and I'll be your guide through part 2 of this journey. If you're drawn to real, mysterious, and haunting stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe, because the line between fact and folklore is often as thin as mist in the midnight woods. The next morning, Jack climbed down from the roof, blood still dripping, half his ear torn open, and, in his eyes, a forest that had never truly slept. He walked toward town, carrying memories so disturbing. Even the police refused to write them down in the official report. Chapter 4. Fight for Survival.
I used to think that if someone lost an ear, cracked their skull, and bled out, they'd scream or pass out from the pain. But when Jack walked into the mill that morning, he didn't shout. He didn't collapse. He just walked in like a ghost, cold, eyes wide like he was still seeing something no one else could.
Account from Thomas Riley, owner of the only lumber mill near Mountain Hollow, who discovered Jack Miller the morning after. On the freezing rooftop, Jack Miller's body curled into itself. No blanket, no coat. Only blood dripping with every heartbeat. His right ear torn off. His left cheek crusted with blood. No hearing, no sleep. The pain had stopped being a sensation. It had become a sound. It pulsed whenever he shifted his spine. It pulled tight every time dried blood tugged at his scalp. But worst of all, it hummed whenever he glanced back toward the forest, to that dark void where the creature had vanished without a sound. No one knows what Jack thought during that long night. No one can truly picture what it feels like to sit alone in the woods, covered in blood, missing an ear, awake for 8 straight hours, knowing something unnatural might still be out there, watching. He didn't dare climb down. He could have died from blood loss. The cold bit through his skin. His body trembled uncontrollably. But death, any death, was preferable to dying at its hands. Only when the first light sliced through the treetops, like a blade cutting through the night, did Jack start to move. Slowly, a rough hand gripped the roof's edge. His blood-blurred eyes scanned the forest one last time. Still quiet, but light now. He slid off the roof, slipped once, hit his head on the wooden edge, but didn't cry out. There was no air left, no tears. No words. Then he ran. Nearly a mile of dense forest stood between Jack and the edge of town. There, a single rutted road wound toward the old lumber mill. Every muscle in his body screamed, each fiber begging to stop. But he pushed forward. One hand clamped his neck to slow the bleeding. The other pressed into his scalp, holding on to life itself. The sun stabbed his eyes, sweat mixed with blood, dripping down his cheeks.
When Jack stepped through the mill door, I was stoking the furnace. I thought he was some lost hunter or vagrant, until he gave me one slow nod and collapsed. I screamed. Called over 2 guys working the line. We laid him on a tarp we usually use for hauling logs. Used my shirt to wrap his head. We did everything we could to stop the bleeding.
They rushed Jack to Carroll General Hospital in an old truck, just a 20-minute drive. But for Jack, it felt like 20 years, caught somewhere between life and death. The ER in summer buzzed like a derailed train. 2 nurses grabbed the stretcher. A young white doctor shouted, "This man's losing too much blood. Deep laceration on the skull. And the right ear is Jesus." Order scans. Prep the transfusion. Keep him conscious. The heart monitor screamed like a broken metronome. Outside the OR doors, blood was smeared across the clean marble floor.
We've seen hunters tossed by bucks, people mauled by bears, even logging accidents. But never a wound like Jack's. What really stood out was the cut. It was precise, like it was made by a hand. That knew exactly where to strike.
I asked, "A human hand?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Not a bear, I'm sure of that." 3 hours later, Jack woke up in post-op. The first thing he did wasn't ask where he was, or whether he'd survived. He whispered, "Is it still out there?" When police came to take his statement, Jack was weak, his cheek wrapped in thick bandages like a pilot's helmet, an IV buried deep in his arm. His head trembled if he said more than 3 words. But according to the nurse who sat with him the entire time, Jack spoke clearly, every detail, with uncanny clarity. It wasn't a hallucination, it wasn't blood loss, or sleep deprivation. I saw it. His hand shook, but not his eyes. Its shoulders were as wide as a doorframe, fur black as burnt coal, but its face made me forget to fight back. "A face? You mean human?" the officer asked. Jack didn't answer, just chuckled, hoarse and dry. "I think it pretends to be human, but it's not." The official report concluded. Jack Miller, 39, was attacked by a full-grown bear in the Mountain Hollow forest. No other witnesses, no tracks, no photos, just Jack and that face. From his hospital bed, he looked out the window. A soft rain blanketed the mountains and mist. He asked the nurse on duty, "Do you believe there are things out there, things we've never named?" The young woman offered a faint smile as she prepared the next IV bag. "I don't know, sir, but I do," Jack said. "They've always been out there, just waiting for us to forget." Chapter 5. Testimony and Denial. The police showed up that afternoon while he was still groggy and post-op. But what struck me was, the moment they introduced themselves, I saw Jack's lips move, like he'd been waiting for that moment. Excerpt from the personal journal of head nurse L. Goodman, Carroll General Hospital, May 22nd. Jack awoke in a cold, white hospital room that felt more like a freezer than a place for healing. Outside the window, fog webbed across the blood-smeared glass like spider silk. Every breath he took sent a jolt through his chest, not from pain, but from memory. Memories that refused to fade. His eyes were dry, but every time he blinked, the same image returned. The fur-covered arm, the human-like face peeking through the trees, clearer than before. When Officer Frank Calder and his partner arrived, notepad in hand, they carried the same composure they brought to any routine wildlife incident. They weren't expecting the emotional landslide that was waiting for them.
Jack sat up the moment they asked their first question, not out of politeness, but like he'd spent all night preparing to speak. His breath was shaky, but every word came out clear, like it had been etched into stone.
"Can you start from the beginning, Mr. Miller?" Jack nodded, clutching the cup of water like he was trying to squeeze himself back into reality. "That tree, it wasn't like the others. I saw claw marks, thought it was a bear at first. But no, the marks, they looked like something bigger, something stronger, like it had climbed the tree." The officer kept writing and until Jack reached the next part. "And after that, I heard a growl while I was chopping. Behind me, I turned around. Nothing. Dead quiet. I thought I imagined it. But what followed was 10 minutes of detailed recollection. Each step back toward the fire, each blow, the feel of claws wrapping around his waist, and most vividly, the moment he came face to face with the creature. I thought it was a bear, but when I turned around, I saw it clearly. It looked like a bear, but the face..." Jack paused. His hand trembled slightly. "It had a human face." The officer stopped writing. "You're saying you saw a bear with a human face?" Jack looked him straight in the eyes. No anger, no desperation, just calm. The kind of calm you find in someone who already knows they won't be believed. "Yes, it wasn't a hallucination. I wasn't delirious. I know what I saw. That face, it couldn't have belonged to a bear." "It's possible," Calder offered gently, "that the blow to the head, or fear, caused your mind to fill in gaps, to imagine..." "No," Jack shook his head firmly. "I grew up in those woods. I know the scent of the wind before a bear comes. I know the sound of every animal. I'm sure this thing, it was different." Nurse Goodman tightened the IV line as Jack's blood pressure began to spike. Is it possible, Calder's partner chimed in, that you saw someone? A person wearing fur? Maybe a wild man living off the grid? Jack looked at him like he'd been insulted. No human carries a presence like that. No one can silence a forest with just a step. By the end of the interview, as the officers packed their notes, Calder said softly, just loud enough for Jack to hear, "Your injuries. They're consistent with a bear attack, and no one else has reported seeing a creature like the one you described. We'll be closing this as an adult bear encounter in Mountain Hollow." Jack didn't respond right away, but just as they reached the door, he croaked, "Then explain this." They turned back. Jack's hand rested gently on the bandaged side of his head. That wasn't the sloppy clawing of a wild animal. That cut felt deliberate, like it knew exactly where to slice, to hurt, not just the body, but the soul. They didn't answer, just nodded and shut the door behind them, leaving Jack alone with the drying blood on the window and the rhythmic beeping of a monitor counting down like a ticking clock in a nightmare.
When they left, Jack stared at me for a long time. Then he asked, "Do you think they'll come back?" I asked, "Who do you mean?" Jack pointed at the window. "Not them, it."
That evening, the final line was entered into the internal case record. May 21st, subject Jack Miller, attacked by unidentified wild animal. Most likely, solitary adult bear. No biological evidence or unusual tracks. Case closed. No tracks. No witnesses. Just Jack and that human-shaped face he would never forget. Chapter 6. The Ghost in the Woods.
The night it happened, I didn't just think I was going to die. I thought I was seeing the last thing a human being was ever meant to see.
Testimony of Judy M., who lived 6 miles from the forest, July 1981. Some still say Jack Miller was just a crazy hermit, a man isolated too long in the woods, slowly haunted by nightmares of his own making. But if you sit down with me, really listen to what I've heard, from people who have no reason to lie, you'll start to understand. Something is alive in the Wakefield woods, and Jack was simply the first to survive and tell the story. News of Jack Miller's wild animal attack quickly spread across local media. A solitary man, badly injured, part of his ear gone, claiming a bear with a human face had attacked him. It was the perfect headline for a quirky weekend segment. The police report closed the case as wildlife incident, no unusual evidence. But just a few weeks later, the stories began.
We got a call from a group of campers, said they saw something too big to be a bear standing between 2 oaks just a few yards from their tent. One kid, maybe 10, said its face looked like my grandpa's, but swollen, like it had been burned. At first, I figured it was kids telling stories, but then more reports came in. Same details, word for word.
Over 30 accounts from hunters, Boy Scouts, even an elderly preacher who once lived in a rest station near the forest's edge. They all described the same thing, a creature nearly 6 feet tall, covered in black fur, moving like a bear, but with human eyes. Eyes that looked straight through you. Eyes that seemed to weigh whether you were prey or kin. Every single witness mentioned the same detail. The forest went dead silent before and after it appeared. Among the scattered communities surrounding Wakefield, people began whispering an old name, a word once passed down through native legends, Ukomar. Loosely translated, it means the one who guards the forest. According to Algonquin legend, Ukomar was once a warrior, cursed by the forest itself after killing the spirit animals guarding the sacred river. He was transformed into a half-man, half-beast to atone for what he'd done. The silence he brings is known as the breath of punishment, a stillness that drains the life around him whenever he draws near. To most modern folk, it's just a fireside tale. But to Jack Miller, it was a near-death experience. Jack never returned to his cabin. After the incident, he moved in with his sister in Oregon. The media forgot the story in a matter of days. But on the edge of Wakefield Woods, the elders still speak of Ukomar as if he is part of the earth, the wind, and the darkness itself. Something that does not need to be believed, because only those who should fear it ever see it.
I asked him one last time, the day Jack was discharged from the hospital. "If no one believes you," I said, "what will you do with the truth?" Jack looked at me. His voice was quiet. I don't need them to believe. I just need them to stay out of that forest.
One October afternoon, a forest surveyor spotted claw marks, deep gouges carved into the side of an old oak nearly 10 feet off the ground. They matched Jack's description exactly. No one touched it. No official report was ever filed. Just one note, scribbled in pencil on the back of a forest patrol log. Don't cut this tree. Something is watching. And maybe even now, as you read these words, somewhere out there, beneath the highest canopy where sunlight never reaches, a pair of eyes is still watching, quiet, breathless, waiting for the next time, when the forest decides to remind mankind that there are places we do not belong. We call it Wakefield Woods. It calls me the next meal. Chapter 7. The Phantom in the Woods.
That night, I didn't just think I was going to die. I thought I was seeing the last thing a human was ever meant to see.
Judy Mayers, resident, living 6 miles from Wakefield Forest since 1978. Recorded July 1981. I still remember the night Jack Miller's sister called me. Her voice was trembling, like she couldn't find the words for what had happened. Something attacked my brother, she said, but something about it doesn't feel right. When I arrived at Wakefield Hospital a few days later, Jack could barely move his head. The wound where his ear used to be had been stitched temporarily. I asked him, if this was a bear attack like the police said, then why did it look human? Jack looked at me, exhausted. Because it wasn't a bear, he whispered. It was something else. News of Jack Miller's attack spread quickly across town. Local papers called it a serious wildlife incident. Some even ran sarcastic headlines like, "Forest bear preps for Halloween?" The police declared it an accident, no motive, no physical evidence suggesting anything abnormal. The case was closed in 3 days, but the real story began afterward.
At first, I figured I was just hearing ghost stories, campfire nonsense, but then the reports started coming in, dozens, all within the first month after Miller's incident. One family of campers claimed they were woken at night by growling beneath their tent. The father shone his flashlight and saw a face that looked human, but swollen and covered in fur, like someone horribly sick. Around the same time, a group of Boy Scouts reported seeing a shadow larger than a man, nearly 2 meters tall, standing silently between 2 oaks, just watching them sleep. I'll never forget what one kid said. Its eyes looked like my grandpa's, but colder.
In total, over 30 eyewitness accounts came in from around Wakefield Woods over the next 2 years. Hunters, scouts, firefighters, even a retired preacher. They all described the same thing, a massive creature, covered in black fur, bear-like in body, but with a face unmistakably human. Deep-set eyes, sunken cheekbones, twisted teeth. And they all said the same thing. The forest suffocated before and after it appeared. No wind, no bugs, no rustling leaves, only a silence that felt like death itself. Across the rural communities around Wakefield, an old name began to resurface, once buried in Algonquin tribal myth, Ukomar, roughly translated, the forest keeper. According to elders from the Brentley village near the forest's edge, Ukomar was once a warrior who mistakenly killed a sacred forest spirit during a hunt. The forest cursed him, a face of man, but the body of a beast. Condemned to guard the woods for eternity, ageless, without language, unable to die, but able to kill. The paralyzing stillness around Ukomar's presence was known as the punishing breath, a sign that someone had trespassed on land they didn't belong to. When Jack was discharged from the hospital, he never told anyone what he planned next. Only once, I asked, "Let's say I believe you. What do you want people to do now?" Jack was silent for a long time. Then he replied, "I didn't survive to prove anything. I survived to warn them." Jack never returned to his forest cabin. He moved in with his sister in Northern Oregon, cutting off all contact with anyone from Wakefield. That cabin, I later found out, was never sold, never broken into, because the locals passed around a simple message. It's still there.
I've seen PTSD. soldiers, grieving families, but I've never seen eyes like Jack's when he talked about what he saw that day. I asked, "Do you really think it was real?" Jack stared out the window, then said, "It's more real than any stitch in my skull."
2 years later, November 1976, a firefighter named Travis Gallard was surveying a section of Wakeson after a series of minor wildfires near the national park border. On the bark of one of the oldest oak trees in the region, nearly 10 feet off the ground, he discovered deep gouge marks, so violent that no human nails could have made them, big enough to fit a grown man's thumb inside. No one touched the tree. No official report was filed. Just one scribbled note in Travis's Forest Patrol log. "There's something about this tree. Don't touch it. Something's watching me." And maybe, one winter night, if you press your ear to the edge of Wakeson Woods, you'll hear nothing at all. Because that silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the forest's final warning to those who don't belong. The woods call your name in silence. You answer with regret if you survive to speak again. I once called it folklore. Now, I call it truth denied. And Jack Miller. He was the last living man who knew where nature ends, and something else begins. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, you now know more than most people ever will about what happened in that break room. But the story isn't over. There's still the basement, the notebooks, and the one question no one can answer. Why? Subscribe to the Inkpath if you haven't already, and don't miss what comes next. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday. I'm Leon Graves. I'll see you in the next one.